So today we need to talk about Joe Burrow, the Davey O'Brien Award, and Steve Bartkowski telling Joe Burrow he should pull an Eli Manning. I got to talk with the guy that wrote the story, and all that's coming up after the bumper.
Don't be cornering me. Hold up. Time. You gotta help me with that corner shit.
What's up, kinfolk? It's RJ Young. I am not on a step mill. Consider hitting the like and subscribe button because I upload a video every single day. It's always college football related, sports related. We have a good time. And today, I want to talk about Drew Davidson's story in the Fort Worth Star-Telegram and Joe Burrow, give you the 411 on that, and then let you hear an interview that I did with Drew Davidson on my radio show. It's called the RJ Young Show. I do the rundown right here at this particular workstation, and I do scripts and whatnot, and I sometimes test out a segment from that show right here on this channel. And in this case, I'm kind of going to review a segment on this show. So I'm going to set this up, then we'll throw it to, yes, Drew Davidson, because that's an outstanding interview. So Steve Bartkowski told the Fort Worth Star-Telegram he thinks that Joe Burrow should pull an Eli Manning to avoid starting his NFL career with the Cincinnati Bengals. I can't fault him for that. Bartkowski personally delivered, though, a note to the Burrow family at the Davey O'Brien Award event on Sunday night, where, he was a Davey O'Brien Award winner, so they gave him the trophy on Sunday night in Fort Worth. Old heads will know that Bartkowski was in town to receive the Davey O'Brien Legends Award, and the Boomers know he was the number 1 overall selection 1975 draft by the Atlanta Falcons. Upon delivering the note, though, he told the Burrows, look, I might have offended them because they're Ohio guys, but I genuinely believe that he should really think about pulling an Eli Manning. I said, you got a chance to do that. That's happened. Elway kind of set the tone. The Mannings delved into it after Eli was picked by San Diego, yada, yada. You know that Manning famously was number 1 overall choice by the then San Diego Chargers in 2004 before forcing a trade to the New York Giants. Elway was drafted by the Baltimore Colts and then, as the number 1 pick in 1983, traded to the Denver Broncos. You know what time it was. For now, Joe Burrow is training in Southern California with quarterbacks coach Jordan Palmer, who not only played with the Bengals, but is the older brother of one Carson Palmer, number 1 overall pick by the Bengals in 2003. Palmer ripped into the Bengals here recently, saying they're not driven to win a Super Bowl. Matter of fact, his quote about the organization was this: if we do have the conversation, Joe Burrow's quote about the organization was this: if we do have the conversation, it'll happen down the road. We're super focused right now. I've only been there a week. It's all ball right now. The NFL draft, as you may very well know, is April 23rd through the 25th in Vegas, where the Raiders are. And I talked with Davidson about Scoop here. But before we get to that, I find this fascinating. For a number of reasons. The first one is Zach Taylor is the head coach at the Cincinnati Bengals. He's only been there 1 year. It ain't like Marvin Lewis still running the place. Plus, Zach Taylor's from Norman, graduated from Norman High, ended up graduating from University of Nebraska. I'm a Zach Taylor fan. I think that if he wants to draft Joe Burrow, he should draft Joe Burrow, because trying to win football games with Andy Dalton or Ryan Finley just ain't gonna happen in a quarterback-driven league. And if you think that Joe Burrow is a change agent, go get him. I still think Chase Young is the best player in this draft, but I understand there's an added value to quarterbacks, particularly ones that had the kind of season that Joe Burrow had at LSU, because he got the ring to show for it and the Heisman Trophy to show for it, and he's from Ohio. So it makes a lot of sense on that end. It's also fascinating and interesting because forcing a trade as the number 1 overall pick is an ultimate power move, right? Until Eli Manning did it, I didn't know it was a thing that you could do. But apparently you can do that if you are a quarterback and if you are going to be the number 1 overall pick. And you know what? It worked out well for Manning. Got 2 Super Bowls to show for it. Worked out well for Elway. You know how that ended for him. Maybe that's how it could go for Joe Burrow. But the dude looked like, in the video they posted to the Fort Worth Star-Telegram, he looked real put out about the question. Going, look, I know that they suck. I also know that if you're the number 1 overall pick in the NFL draft, you're probably going to go to the worst team in the entire NFL. That's just how the system works. And I'm just happy to play football. So if they take him, they take him. If they don't, they don't. We'll see how that shakes out as we get closer to draft day. But right now, it's a very curious thought. And shout to Steve Bartkowski, who just said, you know what? If they don't know, I'm just going to hand them a letter so that they do know that you might waste your entire NFL career playing for a team that ain't any good. Ask Archie Manning about that in New Orleans. Now, the flip side of that is Archie Manning is beloved in New Orleans. Ask him about that Ole Miss. He's beloved in Oxford as well. So as long as you purport yourself to be a good individual and you play really good, sound football, or not even sound football, you just play your guts out, people going to love you for it because you're the quarterback and you like them and you ain't said nothing bad about where they are. That's the one thing I can say Joe Burrow has done well. He has not disparaged the city of Cincinnati or the Bengals. He's just been like, it is what it is. All right, now let's take a listen to Drew Davidson on my radio show earlier today. Back on the RJ Young Show, I'm at Champions Windows and Siding at 58th and South Garnett. Come by and see us, get you hooked up for these great giveaways and items, and hopefully get you set up with a nice sunroom or perhaps windows. But I want to talk about Drew Davidson's story, and I'm going to set it up. He's joining us here on the line, but just reading the story is phenomenal. Steve Bartkowski told the Fort Worth Star-Telegram, that'd be Drew, he thinks that Joe Burrow should pull an Eli Manning to avoid starting his NFL career at Cincinnati. Bartkowski personally delivered the note to Burrow's family during a Davey O'Brien Award event on Sunday night in Fort Worth. Drew, first, thanks so much for taking time to join the show. And this story got better as I kept reading it. What were your takeaways from it?
Yeah, thanks for having me on, RJ. And certainly, I knew it was, kind of eye-opening, when Steve Bartkowski first said that, hey, when I saw his dad and uncle and some of his other family members, I told him, he said they might have been a little offended, but I said, hey, I'm not calling Eli Manning. But, I think, Steve Bartkowski is probably 65, 66. I guess at some point, you can become a little more unfiltered, so to speak. But certainly it took off a little bit more than I thought. But, at the end of the day, Joe Burrow's got a big decision to factor in whether or not, whether he should try and use some of his leverage, some of his power to get out of the Cincinnati Bengals, or who knows? He's going through the process. He could come on board and believe in Zach Taylor and what they're building there.
Talking with Drew Davidson of the Fort Worth Star-Telegram, covers TCU and college football for the paper. And this story begins with Steve Bartkowski. And for the folks that don't know, Bartkowski was number 1 overall pick by the Atlanta Falcons in 1975. And he suggested that Burrow should do what, has been done before, not just with Eli Manning, but with one John Elway, and it seemed to work out for both of those guys. So if you think that Cincinnati is not the place to be, it sounds like you should make a move. That said, what I found interesting is what Burrow had to say to the paper about the process and how the Bengals haven't even reached out to him, though Jordan Palmer is training him. How did you take that?
Well, I think obviously it's still very early on in the process, and they'll meet here at the Combine next week, and then, of course, there's pro days and visits and all that stuff. But, he is working out with Jordan Palmer, Carson Palmer's brother, out in Southern California. And Carson Palmer, a few weeks ago, kind of unleashed on the Bengals, saying they weren't committed to winning a Super Bowl. And, of course, Jordan Palmer played with the Bengals as well. But Joe Burrow said, and take it maybe with a grain of salt, he said, that he had not discussed the Bengals organization with the Palmers, at least as of Monday night when he accepted the Davey O'Brien Award. So they haven't, had that conversation, but I'm sure the Palmers, have been vocal about their feelings about the Bengals, and maybe, that they could be getting in Joe Burrow's ear and kind of telling him, hey, here's what you're in for. And maybe he opts to try and do a power play like Elway and Manning.
Did he mention at all what he expects from the NFL? Like what the evaluation process has been for a guy who basically hasn't played football since winning the national championship at a time when other guys have played in other all-star games like the East-West Shrine Game and the Senior Bowl?
Yeah, I mean, well, it's kind of twofold. Number one, he acknowledged and understands that, hey, if you're the top quarterback, the top player in the class, you're probably not going to a great organization to start with, or, not a team that's been struggling clearly because they're picking high in the draft. So obviously they're not playing very well, which is why they're drafting where they are. So he understands that, but, he also feels like his tape speaks for itself. And he said it was to be determined what drills he would go through at the combine because, in his mind, he's proven what he needs to show. You can turn on the LSU tape and see what he did last year. So he doesn't really have to go, I'm sure teams would love to see him throw in person and whatnot, and go through all the tests, but, he can kind of be selective just because that's how strong he feels about his game film, and I'm sure most people would agree. It's hard to argue against the game film he put up this year.
I know that there are a number of Oklahomans that would like to see him end up in Cincinnati, not just because Joe Mixon is running back there, but because Zach Taylor is one of our own. Went to Norman High School in Norman, Oklahoma, and we're very proud of him, even as he graduated from the University of Nebraska. I wondered, though, was he given any other advice by perhaps past winners at the Davey O'Brien that he felt he should share with you?
No, he had just gotten in town, so,
okay.
And Steve Bartkowski actually, he had yet to meet Bartowski. Obviously, they eventually met, but, his family was in town the night before, and there's a little event, and that's where them and the Bartkowskis ran into each other. But there was other, when Todd Blackwood was on hand, Jim McMahon was down there, so there's quite a few previous winners on hand, and I'm not sure, if they really gave him pro advice or whatnot, or if it's more just say congratulations on a great year, enjoyed watching, that sort of thing.
I would be remiss if I didn't ask you about the goings-on at TCU's football program, Drew, so I'm just going to throw this one at you. How is Jerry Kill being received by the TCU fan base?
Well, I think they're starting to become more excited about it. He obviously probably isn't the sexiest name, so to speak, just to your general fan base, but in coaching circles, Jerry Kill is very highly regarded, very highly touted, and I do think he'll bring a fresh perspective, fresh mind for Gary Patterson, and another just trusted eyes that Gary can rely on. Hey, the offense should go in this direction or that direction to kind of get it going again. So, I think the fan base is beginning to kind of look at Jerry Kill's track record and starting to see, like, hey, he's got some skins on the wall, even though he might not have been the splashiest type hire. He's certainly got an impressive track record.
One more question about TCU football before I let you go, speaking with Drew Davidson of the Fort Worth Star-Telegram. What are the expectations for Max Duggan and that football team in 2020 in Fort Worth and what is expected to be a very top-heavy Big 12 conference this year?
Yeah, TCU definitely expects to get back on track. And, they've had 2 down years, going 7-6 in 2018 and missing a bowl game last year. So they expect, to get back, to bowl eligibility, but they feel like, they've got the talent, to contend for the Big 12 title, and clearly the quarterback play has to improve. They're hoping Max Duggan takes a big step forward. He completed only 54% of his passes, so his accuracy has to get better. And what kind of jump that is, whether it's realistic for him to maybe try and get up to the 60% completion percentage, we'll see. But they definitely expect big things, and they do have the talent. They're sending 7-8 guys to the NFL Combine, so they've got some players and pieces to build around, and guys replacing those guys. But certainly the quarterback play's got to be better.
Well, one thing that I will always bet on is Gary Patterson is going to put out a defense, and he's going to turn some kiddos that not a lot of people have heard about into world beaters and first-round draft picks. Drew, thank you so much for taking time to join me today, man.
All right. Thanks, RJ.
It's Drew Davidson of the Fort Worth Star-Telegram, covers TCU college football in general for the paper. Outstanding dude, and I was happy to get him on the show to talk about his story about Joe Burrow receiving the Davey O'Brien Award and Steve Bartkowski shooting his shot about save yourself. When we come back, Emmitt Smith thinks Dak Prescott should play for the Dallas Cowboys for a discount and conveniently forgot about what he did to the Dallas Cowboys. And you know what? I keep the receipts, bruh. You're listening to the RJ Young Show on your home for sports, the sports animal.